2, the campaign. Wait, Will, what's this, buddy? Your video has been removed due to being unsuitable to a family-friendly atmosphere. Oh, really? What, can't you pommy cunts handle the word cunt? I have far worse words than cunt. Perkele.
Oh, sweet Jesus!
Sometimes I just get tired thinking about how shit this game is, you know? You just gotta sit back and listen to the rain.
Rogue 2 fucking sucks.
Well, back to work. Part 2, the campaign. Campaign is the second half of single player. Does it work well? No, not really. Technology progression is not thought out. It shouldn't simply be a matter of unlocking better troops or leaving the shitty ones unimportant. Empire, again wow, I'm using Empire as a good point of comparison, actually had good technology progression because it was built around improving your base unit. Line infantry were what you used the vast majority of the time, and most of the upgrades were for making line infantry better. The problem I have is that all you do is unlock better units, and once you've researched the heaviest infantry, there's no reason to get the lighter versions. I've said it before and I'll say it again, Medieval's limit system worked the best, because the unit pool forced you to fill out your armies with weaker units because you simply couldn't field as many of the heavier ones that you wanted. In Medieval's system, you built buildings that unlocked better units, but added to this was a unit recruitment pool. Each turn, another spearman was added to the pool that you could potentially recruit from. If you recruited the entire pool, then you couldn't recruit any more of that unit for a few turns until the pool was replenished. If you invested money and time, you could get a larger army of heavy knights, but again, you could have also gotten 5 armies of spearmen instead. The greatest point of that system is that it forced army variation. You would only ever have a handful of super heavy units. The rest were medium and light because they were far more readily available. It made a game for a more varied and more interesting experience, both in the campaign and in the battles, because you had to plan around your army's weaknesses, because it was incredibly hard to field an army of only super strong units. It also made you a hell of a lot more careful with your elite soldiers, because if you lost this unit of feudal knights, you'd have to wait 6 turns before you could recruit another one. And the Mongolian rape train doesn't have any fucking breaks. It also meant they could let you get your best units from the beginning of the game, because there was a restriction on them. Think about it, if you balanced it properly, you would end up fighting with and against the realistic Roman pre-Marian army. Lots of Hastati, a modest amount of Principi, and a small core of veteran Triarii. With the current method, you'll never verse even half of the faction's coolest units. What you get to verse is hordes of slingers and levies, which is boring as shit. I want to battle against the Carthaginian sacred band in the first war for Sicily, not defeat its hordes of Libyan peltasts with my legionaries. Yeah, you can recruit legionaries in 15 turns. Each region on the map is a city, and several regions make up a province. However, they got rid of the small towns that are in the regions. Now it's just the 2 to 6 building plots that you have in each region. Fantastic. The campaign buildings have been dumbed down even more than the transition from Medieval 2 to Empire. At least in Shogun 2 they added tons of diversity and life to that building system. Now it just fucking sucks. Resource needs are gone too. They have receded back to just providing more trade income. I liked how they were necessary in Shogun. It made certain regions more valuable, and trade with certain clans more important if you wanted the best of something. Its removal only leaves the game weaker. Adding to this, the game does a bad job explaining what the buildings do, especially what ones build better warriors. The building tree interface is poorly designed. You can't look through all of it in one panel and check what each building does in another, allowing easy comparison. You have to constantly switch back and forth in that fucking encyclopedia. That takes an annoying amount of time to connect, losing your place. It doesn't take you back to where you click the link, so you have to scroll down all over again. Also, buildings do not tell you what the previous level of that building did, so instead of just going to the max level temple to see if it makes Woden as spears, I have to go through each level of temples one by one. The tabs for armies and provinces are very helpful though, much better than the next arrow. One big list with all the important info is good, but they should have more info there. Tell me how much food they produce or consume from that tab. Public order is now a level that goes up or down per turn depending on the modifiers. So you can have a city with positive 100 happiness, it caps at 100. Then if you set taxes to max, the taxes will add a modifier of minus 20 public order per turn. The settlement will only rebel when the public order reaches negative 100. Good, I like that system. It's more realistic than citizens instantly becoming Rabic upon me leaving the settlement. However, public order is province-wide. As the Iceni, I invaded another region in my province and occupied it. I got the recently conquered debuff, which applies minus 30 public order for one turn, to both the region I conquered and to my capital. This is fucking absurd. Thankfully, another faction's region in the same province does not affect mine, but I really do not understand why public order was implemented province-wide. Apart from being as stupid as a bull with a lobotomy, it can be abused to shit. You take one region in a 4-part province and then just build top-level happiness buildings in it. Get public order to 100 and blitz through the other 3 regions in that province without having to worry about rebels. Culture is also province-wide, however it isn't bound by faction, so Lilybaeum will slowly turn southern Italy into Punic culture. It's kinda fucking annoying. The biggest problem, however, is this balanced building system they've made. What it boils down to is some buildings produce food, some buildings consume it. If you don't get enough food produced, your men suffer attrition and provinces suffer revolts. Now the problem area appears when all the food production buildings start causing massive public order problems. Getting the top tier building of anything either starts giving massive public order problems or massive food demands. Yeah, I agree, building wheat fields really should add to squalor. I forgot all my plebs are hipsters who take to the fucking streets if their food isn't grown by subsistence farmers in the Alps. The problem's only accentuated with the tiny amount of building plots you get. Settlements in Rome and medieval had tons of buildings with no restrictions on how many you could build. Some you had a primary drive for, others you invested in if you had the spare cash. But you didn't have to take out a fucking notepad and calculator every time you wanted to develop a region. If you wanted more trade, you just built a port. You didn't have to go fucking around deleting buildings in every province one by one. Spend 2 minutes waiting for the turn timer to finish, then cycle through every province to build the buildings. It takes real skill, creative assembly, to make a game more complicated by streamlining it. This province system was an interesting step, but they handled it wrong. Each of the regions in a province should have been their own province. They also should have kept the small towns from Shogun. Those could have been fought over pedally, the way we fight over regions in the provinces. They should bring back the building system of medieval, because when there's always something to build, you always feel like you're achieving something. They shouldn't have had those ridiculous public order and food demands. Yes, they should exist, but honest to Christ, a max level delectissen should not have the same public order penalty as max taxes. The Rome 1 mod Roma Surrectum handled that best. Buildings that provided happiness lowered your taxes a bit, and building better taxation centres lowered public order a bit. They didn't just completely fuck your settlement up. They were there to mitigate the snowballing effects of happiness and industry that you got in vanilla. That is the heart of the building philosophy in Rome 2. I understand that. If you could build everything free of all public order and food concerns, the game is plainer, definitely. But restricting the player with every building was not the way to do it. And then restricting the building plots down to bugger all was just thought out piss poorly. Diplomacy is still broken, but it's gotten considerably worse than before. New features are demanding other factions to break their treaties with a third party, adding defensive alliances and non-aggression pacts. You can give orders to allies of where to attack, not that any of mine actually followed them. However, you can't demand tribute anymore, demand settlements anymore. The amount of money you can offer to pay is a percentage of your total. You can't just type in what you want to pay. Military access is infinite for both factions. I can't just request it for a few turns to cross territory. If I want to walk across neutral lands, I have to prepare to do it forever and let them walk across mine forever as well. Not that it matters, they never declare war on you if you walk through without asking anyway. Also, a puzzling removal was the breaking peace treaties penalty. They have no time period in which you can't go back to war without losing reputation with all other factions. You can just attack immediately with no negative effects. They don't even shove your armies back to your borders like in Empire. You can even attack your vassals and allies with zero diplomatic repercussions for anyone but the faction you attacked, and sometimes their friend. Same problem with honouring alliances. If they get attacked, I can simply reply, "Fuck you, got mine," without a single negative repercussion. Can you imagine this shit happening in Lord of the Rings?
Gun knuckles for 8.
Nah, fuck that. But most importantly in diplomacy, have they fixed the schizophrenic way the AI thinks? Nope, it's even more fucking baffling than before.
Of the afterlife, spare my arse.
Yeah, sure, mate. Such as the basic and outright refusal to trade for no other reason than fuck you and the horse you rode in on. They don't even have the excuse of previous total wars where there was a cap on the amount of sea trade routes you could have. It's infinite now. So the refusal of a mutually benefiting cash influx is fucking stupid. One thought I had was maybe they're refusing to let you get more money or materials to curb your growth into a threat. Then I thought, this AI thought that? Yeah, fucking right. When I conquered all of Britannia, the AI suddenly all accepted trade, but nothing else. After some more expanding, they all cut me off again, dissolving trade with me. A few more turns of expanding, they all wanted trade again. The randomness of it all is incomprehensible. Good for fucking you if you luck out and the game works for you. It shouldn't simply be a matter of pot luck. Paradox Games diplomacy works so well because they tell you why everything is happening. Will you join this plot to kill your king? No? Why not? Hover over and see. They love the king. They have moral qualms about murdering people and they hate you. Why don't they like me? Because I'm a lecherous drunk who's possessed by Satan and I executed their children. Okay, I understand the AI's rationale. If they liked me more or had more reasons to kill their king, they would accept. Rome 2's, however, doesn't run by any understandable rules. So it's impossible to predict and manipulate. Something that's kind of fucking necessary in a strategy game. I know they have those fucking modifiers when you hover over them. The problem is that whether the AI will accept or decline something is entirely random. Their diplomatic score with you provides no bearing as to whether or not they will accept trade or alliances or anything. The diplomacy all comes together slightly worse. The new additions of defensive alliances, non-aggression pacts don't make up for the stripped features. The simple peace treaty cooldown timer before declaring war or being forced to honour an alliance or lose reputation with every faction made Shogun 2 much more interesting to play in. Blindly accepting everything that came your way would leave you in a very shitty position, because whilst it would be suicide to join the war for a one settlement faction against the Ashikaga Shogunate, refusing means your daimyo loses that last precious tick of honour because you kept letting him rape and pillage settlements. The lost honour means mass public order problems, unlikely to ever get another faction to negotiate with you because they now know you're a two-faced jackal. The AI was still quite stupid, but it was possible to form alliances people would honour, broker a peace that wouldn't be instantly broken. Yes, I know getting trade was ridiculous in that game, but you just needed some resources, then they were happy to trade with you. The only feature that even comes close to making up for the removals is the war target system, where you get to click on one enemy settlement on the map and tell all the AI to go for it. It hasn't worked once for me though. The diplomacy is simply worse. First off, combat animations for the armies on the campaign map are really cool. Having different and varied ones for losing horribly, losing closely, winning brutally are great touches. Being able to retrain units to give them buffs from a newly built weaponsmith is bloody handy as well, but it's ridiculously expensive, sometimes more expensive than buying the unit again. Armies have to be led by generals to move, recruit, and fight. Instead of just moving the units around willy-nilly, you form a regiment, and that regiment is now there forever, and you can recruit units into it and hire generals for it. What you can recruit depends on the buildings in the province or the mercenary types in that region. Mercenaries are recruited instantly. Now, these regiments have been capped depending on how many provinces you have. This is being Creative Assembly's attempt to streamline the game into a more focused game experience. The reasoning behind that, I hear, is that Creative Assembly have taken statistics from Shogun and said players auto-resolve 80% of the battles. They obviously hate battles, will make them faster and try and reduce the amount of sieges in the game. Well, of those statistics, I'm wondering how many were battles that were obvious victories or obvious defeats. Also, they probably didn't want to play most of the battles because loading times in Shogun were atrocious. People auto-resolve so many battles in Total War because we aren't needed there to win them. They're challengeless almost all the time. The only reason I do any of them is because Total War calculates auto-resolve like a dyslexic parrot. Anyway, their idea was to make sieges less important by removing walls from most of them and reducing the garrisons, and restricting armies so that if you lost a big battle, it was all over. My problem with how it was implemented is that the money is roughly the same, and there was never really a point where I had enough money to overstep or even approach my army's limit if I was fielding full banner armies of dedicated troops. A better way to make the game more decisive would have been to give the armies the 40 unit slots so that the players and the AI would have most of their forces consolidated into one stack. All it really does is handicap you at endgame and how you strategically send units around. Restricting the game in this way was stupid. The generals should have been incentivized, not enforced. Having leaderless armies being super susceptible to agents in all the other Total Wars worked good enough for me. Could even make it impossible to recruit units into leaderless armies, but forcing me to use an arbitrary number of hosts only restricts how I can play. I can't send a few units of slingers up to a frontline army. I have to send a whole army and merge. This is the only way, and with how much infrastructure you need to pour into one province to make it recruit the best units, I thought it would have been kind of necessary to be able to send off small units of men from the motherland to reinforce the armies on the border of the Empire. Not to mention, it is impossible to use them efficiently as a garrison now, since you'll be hitting the cap in 2 seconds flat if you do that. You can't even select the general and leave. It doesn't let you do that. Because they made generals so necessary to lead troops, assassinating generals is meaningless, because another one is instantly spawned back in. In Shogun 2, I could slow down an army by killing its general and weakening it over several turns and several actions by agents. Now, the agent actions are all pretty pointless. The most killing a general does is make you have to verse one less unit if you attack in your turn. The next feature, army traditions, are a dull and boring addition to the game. It's simply level up your legion and then get passives that will only build up over time, giving this army of yours ridiculous buffs, extra attack, extra morale, literally just stat bonuses, because this game really needed to get even easier, didn't it? The only customization beyond that is what you name it and which indistinguishable emblem out of a staggering 5 you use for it. You can't colour or customize the soldiers, get special abilities, it's just passives. The last feature they've added is the army stances. You can tell the army to force march, double its movement speed but half its morale and they can't attack. Fortify, they get a little fort, increase the range they can join a battle in but are immovable. Ambush, which sets up an ambush, and raid. They lose half their movement points and have reduced upkeep but reduce public order and relations with the place you're doing it in. The only one I found a use for was forced march. Raid is pointless. Either I attack the enemy because I'm strong enough or I'm too weak to, so fucking around in his territory will just get that army killed. Doing it in my own territory is not worth the public order penalty. I could just raise taxes instead, and generally I don't leave my army stuffing around in downtime when they could be attacking, so raid is pointless. The next, fortify, has the exact same problem. The AI is never a threat, so moving only 50% every turn so I can fortify won't achieve jack shit, when I could just be moving forwards faster. You could maybe use it to hold a choke point, but that's only going to be useful deep in barbarian lands because the AI will move over water most of the time, and in terms of holding a choke point, the fort itself won't give you that much of a battle advantage. The most it could be used for is to stop enemies rushing past you. Of course, this will be nullified if I simply besiege the fort with one unit then walk everything else past in that turn before they can attack back. Ambush is a useful mode in theory. Its chance of success depending on where you are. If you hover over the map it will tell you, and I like this system better than it just happens in the forests. But again, I've never used it. I've never had to because the game is so challengeless. Strategy. A blockade should not stop me from invading a settlement. It's fucking infuriating. I can't destroy Athens because my clueless vassals have been blockading for 30 years with a full banner transport fleet though, and the city has been empty all this time. Because every army of 2 pelters the Athenians recruit from that fucking city, they charge out like a headless chook into my praetorians. 3 armies of which I have to keep permanently there on guard in the surrounding cities. Oh, and remember how there's that limit on armies now? So it's impossible to win, and guess what? I have other fucking wars to fight than Athens. I tried designating a war target so my vassals would get lost from Athens at least, but he didn't follow orders. So I'm stuck in a perpetual war prolonged by this utterly thoughtless decision. I had to kill my vassal just to get him to fuck off. Adding to this, the sphere of influence forbids you from moving through it. I should be able to move into it, but risk being attacked by the army. 1 unit of plebs should not forbid me from moving. And with the map's more focused pathways, this makes it even more annoying. Even better, the frankly ridiculous size of the cities means your armies will get stuck on either side of them if they're besieged. My army was right up next to the city. I attacked the enemy with my garrison in the city, and the battle was too far away for my army to engage in. I couldn't move my army around to attack the enemy army because that sprawling shithole has taken up so much room it would take 3 turns to get around. Strangely enough though, fleets don't block you from crossing a strait. They must know how strong transport boats are. Siege garrisons are piss poor for just about every settlement. This would be okay if the settlements had walls, but most don't, so now they're all useless. Settlements have become defenseless and easily taken. But won't that get rid of the tedium of constant sieges and make the game more about battles? No! Do you know what it means? It means have fucking fun chasing after an enemy army that materializes out of the ocean to run through your lands, taking settlements one by one. Oh, and of course, with the provincial happiness problem after taking back a chain of settlements in the same province, have fucking fun now having to stop chasing and garrison or lose it to rebels. Maybe you just managed to catch up to his army with yours, but he's hiding in the zone of control of a city he just captured. I can't walk up to attack him. I have to besiege the city, and if I do that, I have to fight double the amount of men, and the reinforcements will attack me in the rear. I can't just send out 1 unit of archers to besiege the city, then send the rest to attack the army, because splitting armies is forbidden now. And since there's an army limit, you can't raise any small garrisons to defend the other cities either. I thought the fucking design philosophy behind nerfing the sieges was to make the game less fucking tedious to play. Are you starting to see how all these retarded fucking decisions are starting to compound into a boulder connected to the noose around this game's throat? Christ, Joe, I'm sorry, I promised to try and use that word less, but I simply can't think of another to describe the design decisions in this game. I think it's time for some soothing pictures of kittens.
Most of the major factions are wiped out with distressing regularity. I'd like to face the big and interesting factions of antiquity, not the Grand Republic of arse. Now, the insane amount of factions, that is what the ancient world was like, but I'm going to ask you something. What do they add to the game? Tons of possible allies to form alliances and conduct diplomacy with? No, diplomacy doesn't fucking work. Cool alternate history scenarios where the great fell and the meek no one ever heard of rise to greatness? Well, that would be interesting if all the different culture zones weren't just carbon copies of one another. Who fucking cares which Gallic tribe threatens Rome? They're all the exact same. In fact, most of the time it's the massive giants of history with piles of unique units and depth poured into them that just fall to African tribes, whose special unit is spearmen with a green shield. A stiffer challenge to expansion than the rebels from the previous games? Well, no, because mods showed you could just spawn a full banner rebel army and have it patrol a province so that it mimics a faction anyway. So I'll tell you what the 100 so lemmings add. Clutter. A fucking mess on the campaign map that would have been better replicated by just having rebel factions with large garrisons. Anything else? Well, up until recently, a biblical end turn time. At late game, it's still getting fucking ridiculous. Some people say turn off view AI moves. Yeah, that's the thing though. Don't I need to know that stuff? I wrote most of this review waiting for my turn.
And while we're talking about turns, 1 turn per year. This is terrible. All your agents and generals will die so quickly you'll hardly get the chance to level them or get used to them. The lack of seasons really hurts this game too. Attrition during winter works so well in Shogun. They still have attrition for extreme climates when walking off the roads like in the desert or over mountains, but there's never any point in doing that, since it's just slower than the roads. Attrition doesn't have the same effect as it did in Shogun. The seasons forced you to think out your deployment. You always waited till the very start of spring to start your campaigns, whilst winter was generally a time for a breathing space. It was even better in the 12 turns per year mods. It provided different conditions for you to plan and think around. This isn't in Rome 2. They still have it when you're diseased or broke, that's good. It locks the army down until it's healthy again. Or you risk having a much weaker force. Risk reward, that's good. But whilst the cause of being broke makes sense, disease is a purely random chance. Okay, look, a point. I know it's probably not a universal 5% chance for syphilis outbreak at all times for all factions. When I say it's random, I mean its mechanics are not explained to the player, and the method of dealing with it, if any, is not provided. Random gameplay factors is Captain Cunt the shit-eating taco dropping out of fucking nowhere and squashing you in an FPS. A mechanic is HQ telling you the captain will only come down when you leave cover or use the shit cannon too much. Disease should be caused by things, the province being a trade hub, being one that imports food, is in an extreme climate that your soldiers are not used to, if the province is in a state of turmoil, etc. Have reasons for it occurring, so you know to avoid them, and have reasons causing it, so you know how to stop it or cause it in someone else's land. That was my favourite trick in Rome 1, infecting my spies with the plague and spreading it around my enemies' cities constantly. The campaign AI doesn't do anything. It mostly just builds max level buildings and spends the rest of the game fighting off rebels. It cannot manage the settlements, especially not the provincial happiness problem. Looking around the map, nearly every province has -80 happiness. Half the Mediterranean is controlled by rebels. In Shogun 2, by the time you approached mid-game as a local power, you would find other local powers who were of roughly equal strength. By late game, there were 1 or 2 other superpowers for you to contend with. In Rome 2, you just snowball. No other factions become even remotely powerful. You just swarm over the AI like a horde from the steppes. It means the only time you'll ever have a fair fight is in the beginning of the game where there are some other factions of roughly the same size, but you will quickly become unstoppable. In war, the AI readily abandons its cities. I can walk in and take them unmolested. Here's a wonderful quote from the patch notes. The AI will generally defend its last settlement, but if it thinks it will lose, it'll run away and find a new one. What? Why would anyone abandon their homeland, their women, children, elderly, for some fucking colony in Libya? Yeah, wow, all these Africans really fill the void from the complete destruction of Sparta and its entire culture. It does attack more from sea, but because of how powerful transport boats are, it gets impossible to stop these sea assaults. Even if you do have a large navy to stop them, the turns themselves begin to work against you. Say I have a navy in dock 1 town over from
where they have an army in dock. They then in one turn move just out of my zone of control and land again in an undefended part of my province. If the game was running in real time, the moment their ships left port, mine could have too and intercepted theirs, but because of the fucking turns, you can't. Maybe if they'd made the zone of control equal to the army's movement points and made it so that you can walk through the zone of control but risk being attacked, but of course that would require basic thought. Look, this isn't as if I'm spending an hour complaining about things I wish they'd added to the game. All of this shit was in previous titles. That brilliant idea was from Empire, wasn't it? Blinkin' Jesus, that game's looking better and better by the bloody minute. Huh. It is true. An ugly person will look attractive if you compare them with rotting afterbirth mangled by a chainsaw. The only piece of praise I've ever heard for the AI is that it does attack defenseless cities more. That isn't because it's better, it's because all the fucking cities are defenseless now. All agents and generals now use 3 stats: Authority, Cunning and Zeal. An Authority general will get Rally, a Zeal general will get Warcry, etc. These stats overcomplicate things. Shogun 2's system of simply adding stars to the actions they were good at were more indicative. A 10-star ambush general? He's probably good at ambush, isn't he? Instead, you have to discern what skills they have from the 3 stats, then figure out what they do. It's just much clearer in Shogun 2. I'm guessing it's also used in calculating assassination chance. A Zeal general is less likely to be killed by a Zeal action, but it's just massively overcomplicating the system. Simply making higher ranking generals harder to kill, and having a Metsuke in his army making it even harder to kill him, worked. This interplaying system is never going to be used. There are 0 situations where you'll be tailoring a new agent to attack another's weaknesses, because agents have such a small cap, level so slowly and take so long to get to where you need them, and die so quickly that they'll never be available to take advantage of the system. Adding to this, there's little or no situations where you need to either. You don't have a need to assassinate enemy generals, they're all level 1 most of the time, and even if they are higher level, it doesn't matter much to gameplay. I've never seen them use their general abilities. Keeping your generals safe was important in Shogun, since the unlocked general abilities like stand and fight were pretty fucking critical to winning battles, and you had a very limited supply of generals. The infinite general pool in Rome 2 makes keeping them alive unnecessary, and since the battles are so easy, you don't need a full level general either. Finally, of course, the agents are so ridiculously expensive in comparison to their actual usefulness, you would accomplish more most of the time just building another army. The skill trees have been changed in a bad way. They still act in a tree, but the tree is hidden from you. You don't know what the 3 different disciplines will gain you further down the line. Every time you level up, you either get to choose a skill or go to the next level of an already chosen skill. Each skill can go up to level 3. The rough guideline that I could guess at was that there was base, Zeal, Cunning and Authority traits. You chose Authority, say, and that unlocked tier 2 Authority traits. And after you get to a certain stat level, you get tier 3 Authority abilities. Whilst it is still in a rough skill tree, the simple lack of a visual skill tree is very annoying. You can't easily distinguish what each pathway does. It makes trial and error the only way to discover. They do list all the skills in the encyclopedia, but that's it. They list them. All of them. Alphabetically. It's not good design. It seems there is a skill tree in the encyclopedia now. I have no idea whether it was always there or added in a patch, but it just begs the question, why the fuck isn't it in the base game like it was in Shogun 2? Adding to the skill tree, the general can also get a maximum of 3 traits. Now, to my knowledge, the occurrence of these are random, which is okay, but max 3? What, was it like the 3 words they used to describe their personality in the job interview? Lastly, household retainers. You can get 1 retainer per individual, and they give all sorts of assorted effects. There's too bloody many of them. You get new ones all the time, and unless you replace them, they go into a pool, eternally, for every general in your faction. Barring certain retainers that they take to the grave with them like some fucked up Viking funeral.
I can see my master. Let me join him then.
The frankly enormous retainer pool would have been much more fun if there wasn't the arbitrary retainer cap and retainers being universal. Agents themselves have been changed in some strange ways. There are three types: champions, dignitaries, and spies. Spies can go undetected and sabotage, champions can train soldiers or lower public order of settlements, dignitaries can boost the general stats and lower upkeep or spread culture and economically hinder settlements. All three of them can assassinate. Now, in Shogun 2, each of the agents could act against each other and had weaknesses to each other, rock, paper, scissors style. However, only two could assassinate generals, and their definitive purpose to the campaign was more defined. Adding to what I said earlier, they don't have much effect on the world around them. I can sabotage the defences, but the AI ain't fucking defending them. I can demoralise the army, but that assumes spear militia were in any way a challenge to fight. I can spread discontent, but the AI's terrible build plan either has nothing but temples, so it can't be sabotaged, or nothing but farms, in which case they're sabotaging themselves. The agents only have one purpose: spies scout, champions power level your troops, and dignitaries convert. Whilst this isn't as bad a step back as to Empire's agents, it's just worse than in Shogun 2. The plot doesn't make any sense, and everyone is a stupid asshole. Wait, what the fuck am I reviewing? The politics mechanic is a retarded attempt to ape Paradox's Crusader Kings game. The running idea behind it is a version of Realm Divide. Now, Realm Divide was such a good feature in Shogun because it was the only thing that made the late game challenging to play. In every other Total War, early game was hard, mid game would have a few challenges if you acted with the diplomatic grace of North Korea, late game was pointless to play because you were unstoppable. Sure, it affected vassals and allies horrifically, but that was a balance problem, not a feature one. Them trying to do this through a civil war mechanic doesn't work. 1. Randomness in strategy doesn't work. It's not predictable or manageable. As the Iceni, I was floating just over 0.5% tribal chief support throughout my entire game. At an utterly random point, the civil war popped. In some Polish shithole at the very arse end of the empire, 5 half-banner armies spawned of heroic nobles. All my armies were next door, so, surprised, I wiped out the rebellion instantly. So there are a few problems with this, aren't there? Random occurrence, random location, random severity. In Crusader Kings, rebellion works because it's outlined perfectly. All these people in your kingdom are clamouring and plotting together for independence. This means that when they start the war and declare for independence, all of the territory they control will become rebels. They have 35% of the liege levy, that means 35% of the soldiers in my kingdom will be theirs. What will trigger them declaring for independence? The chance of them starting a civil war increases the more people join the independence faction, and if I become weakened and lose too many of my own personal soldiers, how do I manage it? Kill the lead people in the independence movement who hate me, improve relations with the neutral members, imprison anyone who I have an excuse to, like they're a heretic, a child, a woman, or they're plotting to change the colour of the royal drapes or something. The management of it is dead simple. In Rome's, it isn't. None of what I do appears to have any effect. With this system, what they should have done is make you, the player, be the Senate. You recruit generals from all these powerful houses and have to watch them carefully to see that one of them doesn't become too powerful and attempt to overthrow you. Any armies led by that house will join them, and they will get a percent of your empire correlating to the percent of influence they hold in the Senate. Or perhaps you assign them provinces to govern over like how you could in King Arthur. I mean, you ripped everything else out of that game, why not this? Instead of a civil war being a one-time only event, it should be something that will happen constantly if you manage your generals badly. For the other factions that are monarchies, they should have given you the family tree, but make your relatives very precious. So you recruit generals so you don't lose family members to wars, but again, risk having a general become too powerful or just become too disloyal. Literally just copy the system from Shogun 2. Next, they should have made it perfectly clear what was needed to be done to fix the problem. None of the politics in Rome makes sense. Assassinate enemy, lose ex-senator support, yet after doing it I don't lose the amount they said. I've actually gained some. Adopt a character, nothing changes. Marriages, I don't know what the fuck's happening there. Assassinate every fucking person apart from your family, still have the exact same influence scores. It doesn't make any fucking sense. Instead of this gravitas shit, they should have attributed senator support directly to the characters. This character has 50 senators supporting him. Assassinate him, he's the sole eligible member of his family left, or all the senators go and support other people. I want this character to be more supported, pay money and win senators over from another general. That would have been a far more direct and efficient system. What they have is autistic. Ultimately though, their switching Realm Divide for Civil War was a bad decision. Like I said, Civil War should be the consequence of bad management. The endgame threat should be a coalition event like Realm Divide. Say, once you get to max level Imperium, every faction that isn't at near max relations with you all ally and declare war on you, ignoring fighting over each other, excluding extreme rivalries that a clever player could exploit to stay completely hostile to you until you get down, say, to half-level Imperium. Then they will start fighting amongst themselves again since you've stopped being a threat. The point of it should be to make late game challenging to play, but at the same time something that can be manipulated and planned for. Not a random event in a random spot with a random severity. So what can I say about the campaign in conclusion? Well, I suppose the description to this video does it justice. It is an orgy of poorly implemented features that cripple the pacing. It really puts me in the mind of some of the poorer mods out there, ones with no thought out design and are simply a large bungle of shit they shoved in that seemed like a cool idea. The campaign is bereft of an overlying design philosophy. It wasn't all made and thought out to work seamlessly together. It was just a bunch of ideas that sounded cool, so they tacked them onto the game without thinking about how it would change the game. And like I listed at the end of strategy, you can see how when it all blends together, it makes the campaign worse, not better. The campaign is not unanimously worse than Rome 1's, the way that the battles are. It has many good features, but what it is unanimously worse to is Shogun 2's campaign. And that's a real kicker. The DLC. Fucking hell, are you still talking? I honestly thought this was going to be the biggest problem in the game. I barely care about it anymore. Of course, the cost of the extra factions is ludicrous. $13 US for the Greek states.
Tell him he's dreaming.
There are so many factions that are screaming out cut content, Dacia, Thrace, Iberia, Bactria, to name several culture groups and factions that have tons of units that are unplayable for no reason. I mean that, no reason. There was an all factions playable mod after one day, and I would suggest it to everyone who still wants to play this game. An interesting point I discovered from it was that Seleucia had voiced units on launch. Units shouted Silver Shield Pikemen, Hellenic Cataphracts when I selected them. The much hyped free LC. That's all shit that was already in the game, you fucking clowns. Why are you trilling about how nice they are for releasing this to you? It's already in the fucking game. The cunts should have already given it to you on launch. Most of the units for the Nomadic Tribes DLC packs were already in the game, so it's them charging money to write 3 faction descriptions in the campaign selection screen, make a model of the fancy horned headpiece for the horses, then copy and paste the cataphract model from the Parthians, and switch them from playable to unplayable. Christ, ain't that just fucking value for money right there. Different people have different expectations for games though. I'm sure there were people who demanded that the Barbarian Invasion expansion was released for free too. What's the real difference? Well, in my opinion, as if that wasn't fucking obvious, is that downloadable content comes under 3 categories: expansions, fluff, and bullshit. Let's go through them. A good DLC expansion would be something like Rise or Fall of the Samurai, things that in the old days were called expansions. They added new factions and time periods to the game and genuinely gave it a new dimension. And when I say add factions, I mean add new ones, not unlock old ones. Neutral fluff DLC is stuff like blood packs, music packs, or graphic packs. Small things made after the game and change nothing but the look or sound of it. You don't need them, and if you want them, they're sold cheap, and whether or not they're worth your money is determined by whether or not you want those things. The bullshit DLC, which is what they're doing, is selling things already in the game and adding literally nothing, taking out parts of the experience, parts of a full fucking priced experience, and demanding extra for them. If they release a faction pack that added Northern Scandinavia to the map, that would be good DLC because it's adding to the game. New provinces, new factions that they made after they release the game. What they're selling isn't made later. The Greek states was on-disc DLC, a part of the game they purposely separated from vanilla to entice pre-orders, then sell to the latecomers, much like the Hattori were in Shogun 2. Nomadic Tribes straddles the line of expansion and bullshit. It adds stuff to the game technically, but really not that much for $8. In the cases of Nomadic Tribes types of DLC, we reach the question, is it worth it? One bloke made a good point on the forums about DLC. Everyone ignored him, we were busy formulating measured and critical responses to creative assembly. I mean, come on, do you know how hard it is to write a death threat and cutouts of 10 out of 10 perfect review scores? How dare you do promo work for this shitty game, Brian? I'm coming to your house with the sheep shears. Money has a different value to everyone. Some people will spend nearly $400 on one night out. There are people who earn half as much as me but drive cars 5 times as expensive as mine. Everyone has a different definition of value, and it's up to them to decide whether a product is worth their money. All we can really say when discussing the inherent value of expansion and fluff DLC is whether it's worth it for us personally. Bullshit DLC should always be called out for what it is and detested. It is a pathetic business practice and absolutely unacceptable, and any one person who says otherwise is frankly one fucking stupid person. The Nomadic Tribes does add units. I personally hold the belief that one of those factions should have already been in the base game as well as their unique unit, as should one faction have been for each of the unique culture groups, but that applies to my definition of the value of the base game's $80 price tag. If it wasn't free for those first few weeks though, I wouldn't have gotten it. And honestly, with this mess of a game, I wouldn't bother with faction packs. They really won't do anything for it. And that's the big news, isn't it? Their new expansions, Caesar and Gaul. What a fucking joke. Yeah, that'll be great. The astounding Battle of Gergovia recreated in all the brilliance of Rome 2's engine. The pivotal Battle of Alesia! Oh, wait, no. Vercingetorix left with the rest of the Averni and conquered Ireland because the AI doesn't think it can hold its last settlement. New units! Chosen swordsman, chosen spearman. Wow, it's almost as if all they've done is copy-paste assets into a different combination, like what Radius Mod does, for fucking free, and with more units, and actual thought put into how they affect the balance. What's next, the fucking Peloponnesian Wars, except Xerxes just puts all his men into transport boats and sails past Leonidas? Christ, they're actually asking people to pre-order this fucking thing. 24 turns per year? A mod was already doing that after 4 fucking days. What's taking you window-licking bludgers the 3 months? Gee, you know, I just think I'd actually have more fun buying a Happy Meal rather than these half-assed, frankly pointless expansions. Multiplayer in Rome 2 sees no new innovations. The Avatar mode from Shogun 2 is gone. Instead, there's a quick battle, which is just another word for matchmaking with a time limit. Oh, no, sorry, I beg your pardon. Matchmaking on blatantly unfair maps where one side simply starts on a massive fuck-off hill, or being in a map covered in forest at night and being foggy, because seeing jack shit is so much fun. Adding to the shitty maps and infuriating weather conditions is the minuscule collection of maps. Creative Assembly really needed to actually make some more dynamic maps that had something interesting to do on them. In the custom battles, there are 8 player slots split into 2 teams. No free-for-alls and no scored resolution, just standard last man standing. Disappointing, since one of the best parts of Rome 1's multiplayer were the massive 8-player free-for-alls. Also, you will have to play even teams, as the money total can only be decided for each player, so if there are 2 players versus 1, they flat out get double as much money. Thankfully, they finally allowed you to see what allies are building. Annoyingly though, you can't do this after you've clicked ready. As for the maps, Creative Assembly have those handmade for you, but introduced a system where you click anywhere on the map of the world and the game generates a map from that. Now this seems cool in theory, but in reality it will quickly turn into an annoying affair of clicking around until you find a map that seems fair to play on. Thankfully you can set bookmarks for cool maps you found, but the multiplayer scene is yearning for some actually designed maps that give you tons of options for you to play with. You also can't select the season or the time of day. It's night or day, then rain, fog, snow or dry. I like doing sunset battles in winter. It's really sad I can't do this. There isn't time period selection, and as for multiplayer campaign, it's still only 2 players, and the other faction's turn time is almost triple that of single player, so only the patient will be able to play it. One incredibly useful feature is the ability to draw on the map with red, green and blue for communication with your allies. Yeah. Important communication. Another gripe of mine is that you have to take a general in your army, so it's impossible to test units against each other with the AI. It's also unstable as hell. I'm getting desyncs all the time, lag for most of the rest. I can't say for certain how well balanced it is, frankly I don't care. I've heard patch 7 has mangled the balance so badly you need to play it with a balance mod. If you do care, I'll give a shout out to Zeript. He literally tests everything off against each other, and he's probably the best bet for figuring out the balance. Fuck, what else? Too many factions look almost the same colour. Iceni, Egypt, Rome, Suevo, it's actually difficult to distinguish them in the same battle. Chat is good and bad. There's tons of chat rooms that are easily accessible from the entirety of the game, even from single player. That's a really good feature. However, there's no separate modes in the multiplayer game for team chat and all chat. So you have to talk to your team one at a time via personal messages. Whilst it doesn't have the breadth and depth of what I outlined it needed in an earlier video of mine, at least it's gotten rid of avatar mode. But most importantly for multiplayer is the asymmetrical gameplay. Rome was the only Total War that truly had every faction work differently. The tactics you used in a battle with Macedon were different for the ones you used with Seleucia. What is it with all these weird names? Can't these places have proper names? Like Dundaraban? Or Chalora? Galagambone? Pikemen against Rome, you know you have to phalanx charge. Greek states against Seleucia, I'll have to keep some Spartans in reserve to protect my rear from cataphracts and elephants, take my hoplites out of guard mode, and crush his pikemen quickly. Every other Total War you played the same way tactically with each faction, barring pro MLG bunny hop strats and Shogun 2's fucked multiplayer. Does Rome 2 emulate that? Yes it does. Each of the Pike kingdoms do play differently, as do the barbarians in the east, but the degree to which these factions can interplay is crippled by the stripped battle mechanics. Music, sound, and overall polish. There are barely any movies in the game, a token pathetic handful. These are the points when you realise how unfinished a game is. Comparison time. Let's compare how both games kickstart the experience for the first time you play it.
The beaten army of Consul Linus lies under siege in Capua. I, Gaius Fulvius Silanus, have hurried south with my meager command to aid the consul. Further reinforcements are expected from Rome. The city has been sighted. It is surrounded by the Samnites, a people native to the mountains of central Italy. The Samnites, the sworn enemies of Rome. Capo is in sight. Report.
Okay, that was a bit dry. Kinda dull music in the intro. It's the sort of tension-building track you put in for the build-up to the payoff in a scene, but we've started with it, and we don't really know who the fuck these people are, so it's just awkward music. And 1 minute of halting and monotonal exposition. Mark's decided to put stress on random words.
People native to the mountains of central Italy.
Snappy transition from the loading screen, though. Alright, let's have a look at how we start off with Rome 1.
The year is 329 BC. Italy. Warring city-states vie for power and superiority over their neighbors. The Senate and people of Rome control the Latin states, but enemies surround them. The Republic stands at a crossroads in history.
Romans, senators, friends. Latium is firmly under the rule of the Senate and people of Rome. The Latin people are now one. Not since noble Brutus drove out the last king have we known such a glorious day. But now, my friends, in this hour of glory, we must be on our guard. To the south, treacherous Greeks and Samnites block our trade. Tarquinii groans beneath the tyrant's heel. That tyrant threatens Rome. Will we abandon Tarquinii? And now barbarians raid from the north, burning and pillaging Roman lands. Shall we let danger fester and grow? Or will we act as Romans, with courage and dignity? Remember, we are the sons of Mars! As Senate leader, I call upon tribunes Gaius Julius and Decius Brutus to smash the Gauls and relieve Tarquinii. All those in favor say aye.
Wow. So we get short and concise background information with invigorating music and scenes of battles and carnage, tantalizing the player with what the game has to offer. Then we transition smoothly to the Senate with a powerful speech that they recorded in an echoing chamber so it sounds like you're there in the Senate with him. Cutting away to show footage of the plagues besetting Rome as he describes them, with the music building up to a crescendo in perfect synchronization with the climax of his own speech, which ends with you damn near shouting aye along with the rest of the senators because it is built up to saying what you are doing and why you are doing it. What do I feel at the end of Rome 2's intro?
The Samnites, the sworn enemies of Rome.
Oh, are they? That's really interesting, Mark. All your halting sentences have just thrilled me to the bone. So that's a fucked up intro. Maybe when I actually start the game, they'll have done a better job. I know. Let's play as the Germans, the most feared barbarians of the civilized world.
The Celts think themselves superior, but their decadence makes them weak. The Boii are nearby. Put them out of their misery and seize their lands for the tribe. Move westward and you will get the chance to kill Gauls, although other German tribes stand between you. War comes naturally to your people.
Holy fucking shit, who wrote this?
Will make your rivals more open to negotiation. However, your ultimate goal should be confederation. The joining of tribes to make a single, stronger one. Under Swaby leadership, the people of Germania will rise up and crush their enemies.
If they're over the age of 4, they need to fucking kill themselves.
Before my grandfather's grandfather was born, this was our land. These are good places. Our gods live here, in the trees and rivers. They watch over us. We are happy. We hunt. We love. We have families, homes, a good life. But sometimes we must fight. The Romans disturb the gods. They burn the forests. They take what is ours, wives, children, land. And the Romans talk of how they will help us and protect us. They put us to sleep with golden promises. When we wake, all we had is gone, stolen. They take our sons and turn them into little Romans. Ha! So we fight to keep what is ours. What must stay ours. There can be no peace. No peace with Romans, men of stone and iron and lies. There can be only war.
If you need me to explain the difference to you between those two intros, give up right now on being in any way a creative or interesting person. Battle noises for metal and clashing is okay, but the chunky splats, screams and crunches from Rome 1 are sorely missed. The new versions are more realistic, you say? You'll fucking turn your nose up at engaging sound effects but let flaming javelins and war dogs pass? I don't fucking care which sandals the Egyptians are wearing or whether or not the clashes were recorded off authentic bronze armour. What I want to hear is the sound of someone having a seriously shit day at the other end of a battle axe. It's all generic background shouting, intercut with someone slapping a sack. The horns blowing with each order you give is a great touch, always reminds me of the Ride of the Rohirrim, but I wish there was more than just one horn for every single unit in the game, and that the hornblower was actually in the unit. I should also note how much I love that all the Celts and Germans are significantly taller than the Romans, a really nice touch. Also, believe it or not, there is a shit ton of rage coming over that decision. Mostly from dirty Italians. But you can't blame CA for that. It's an argued point in history how much the heights of humans varied. How much protein you eat as a child affects how tall you will grow. Personally, I liked it. If you don't, there's already a mod that fixes it. And one that makes the Spartans naked like in 300. The combatants shouting and screaming at each other and at the enemy is a great addition, even if it is pretty fucking corny.
Hi, Spotty!
Zooming into your general once you've started the battle and you can hear him doing the speech. It's much less interesting than Medieval's staggering varieties, but they still give the combat a spark of life. Sadly though, the direct-to-player voice acting leaves a lot to be desired. Mark Monotone has done dull in his lines. Over a long period of gameplay, you will begin to despise him.
The men are wavering.
Yep, thanks Mark.
The men are wavering.
Thank you, Mark.
The men are wavering.
Thank you, Mark.
The men are wavering.
Lay down, you bastard.
This is a shameful display.
I've seen more lively performances in morgues. The other actors doing lines in this have done a really cringeworthy job. And I keep hearing that twit from Rally Point too.
Bastards! They're fighting back! We survived D3? Yeah, that was fantastic. Big congrats to the whole team on that one.
Is it late? Oh, sweet Jesus!
Did you just pull random staff members into a back room to record all this audio? You can tell that because they confuse acting with screaming. What happened to the guy who did the barbarian voices in Rome 1? He was awesome.
This is a great victory. The cries of dying enemies are sweet music to our warriors.
Well, that Roman 13-year-old whose voice was breaking.
The gods be praised!
enemy's hearts are full of fear and now they flee.
The voices for each unit are meant to bring each faction to life. I wouldn't mind if the voices were stereotypical. Stereotypes are at least distinguishable. Almost every faction sounds the exact same. The only way to distinguish between them is that the soldiers say the name of the faction that they belong to. I don't care if I click on a German soldier and he goes, "Oh, hello, Sir Chief, we're going to have schnitzel now, yeah?" It brings some life into the game. And speaking of life, the worst for last music. It's fucking atrocious. Absolutely fucking pathetic. I couldn't hum it back to you if you asked me to. That's how bad it is. Bland, uninspired shit straight out of Empire. No, it's worse than Empire's, which isn't surprising since they got that composer back to compose for this game. Fucking great. The horrendous handling of the music has really struck a horrible blow to this game's theme and tone. The game is a mile worse for the lack of it. Not bringing Jeff Van Dyke back to remix his original songs is so disappointing. I shouldn't have to explain how dramatically important music is for evoking feelings in the viewer. It strikes a primal part of each human in such a powerful way. It's really the only way this sort of game can evoke emotions in you because of its dehumanizing nature. And if it doesn't, and if you don't care about what's happening, then you won't enjoy the game. Whether it's Rome 1's marching theme that hyped you up, or Medieval Kingdom's jaw-dropping battle epic, the point of the themes is that they excite you. The music in Rome 2 simply doesn't, and that's a real failure. In summary, Rome 2's battles are sad. Less detailed, harder to manage, and most importantly, tactically weaker. It even looks uglier. For all the fucking graphics and boring scripted animations, it's still uglier. Simply seeing two units of men clash realistically, move normally, fight like humans, always wins over a horde of well-animated ants on meth. I'm bored of managing a dumbed-down version of the campaign that's equally as weak in its limitations as it is frustrating in its execution, where the strategy is sidelined for a campaign experience that is a slow, tedious grind, challengeless grind, against an electric grindstone that every now and then turns off, forcing you to go and turn it back on again to keep plodding onwards. A multiplayer experience that is crippled by its inferior battles, terrible maps, non-existent variety, and unplayable desyncs. A multiplayer campaign so slow that it is literally unplayable. With all this being said, will you enjoy the game? If the optimization problems are resolved, the worst bugs and the flat-out brain-dead AI is fixed, then, if you've never heard of Total War before, it will blow your mind and you'll adore it. If you've been playing Total War since Empire, you will find this game to be a reasonable progression of the series, in all that that entails, but you will find it substantially worse than Shogun 2. But, for those of us who've been playing since the first Shogun, Medieval or Rome, this game will only disappoint. It has been 10 years. 10 years since the first Rome shocked the RTS world. And all that's changed in the game is the campaign map. All the innovation has been in trying to compete with Europa Universalis, but you'll never succeed. Total War has never been about the campaign. The campaign was there to serve the battles and make you invested in them, and it's not doing that. The game could have done just as well if the campaign was just a series of amazingly designed battles framing a cool story like the 3 Punic Wars or Caesar and Augustus. They're spending all this time and effort into revolutionizing the campaign, but the battles have not seen a single big innovation in the last 10 years. They are not bigger. They are getting less complex. With every new iteration, we lose features, and the ones they replace them with are less interesting, less detailed, or worse. Everything that made Total War great, the size, the tactics, the options, is slowly fading away with each new game. Slowly it's becoming duller, less challenging, less interesting. This has been an hour and a half talking about all the stripped,
features from previous Total Wars. God forbid we start talking about the swarms of defects that have been hovering around this series since it started. After 10 years they should be adding features, adding game modes, polishing and perfecting, enhancing the simulations, supersizing the battles. Since Empire, it's been considered a mark of accomplishment if CA makes a game that doesn't cut gameplay. So what happened? There's a theory running around that these games are getting, as the marketing fellows say, streamlined so as to be ported to next-gen consoles, and to be more accessible to a wider demographic. In real terms, jettisoning every good feature that earned them the smaller but dedicated fanbase, in turn for the hope of getting lots of casuals to buy the game. To which I can only reply, cause that worked real well for Supreme Commander 2, didn't it? Maybe you should ask Chris Taylor what he's been up to recently. Oh wait, failing Kickstarters. Do you know how I found Total War? When I was 5 and being struck dumb at seeing 400 individual soldiers on the battlefield. Do you know how people recommend Total War? In this game, you control thousands of soldiers, fighting against thousands of other soldiers, from the legions of Rome to the Knights of Europe to Napoleon's regiments. There is not one fucking person on the planet who recommended Total War to a friend saying, dude, the game's really streamlined. This idiotic concept that a game will sell more simply by making it more simplistic and bland is just so aggravating. There is a real difference, CA, in a game that's hard to play and a game that's hard to learn. And Total War is not a hard game to play. And for fuck's sakes, I was playing it when I was 5. It can't be that fucking hard to learn. All dumbing the game down will do is make everyone who enjoyed the strategy leave. I remember once them explaining how it wasn't worth the time and money to implement hot seat campaigns again, or greater than 2-player multiplayer campaigns, because relatively no one plays them. And to that I say, how many people can run the game at full graphics? How many people zoom in to look at facial animations or kill moves in the combat, when generally they have more pressing things to do? It was so hyped that you had the largest budget you've ever worked with. Why'd you use it to introduce stupid features no one uses? Graphics you will only notice when you have nothing to do in the battles. Why are you using it to make the game less interesting, less engaging, less unique? Personally though, I don't believe that they made it this way for consoles. This game is still far too complicated to play with a controller. I think this game was just released before they were ready. Sega forcing it out the door. Whilst that depressing reason explains the bugs, optimization and polish, it doesn't explain why they made so many stupid design decisions. And originally I thought that was because it was the consequence of a rushed out bad idea. Then Al Qamar shared an insight into the Rome 2 team from the credits of Metacritic. 21 programmers, including that clown McKinley, had never coded a game on Metacritic before. Go and check them out. If this is true, then this game was made by inexperienced amateurs. But I have no idea whether that's true or not. I can't vouch for how accurate it is, and I don't want to believe it. The way that I don't want to believe that it's Creative Assembly's fault for the state of this game. There is one last explanation for what caused this game to fail, and it was one I hadn't considered, and it was given by Voland in his video, A Treatise on Rome 2. And it's the belief that the game was not a product of a bad publisher or an inexperienced team. It's the belief that the game was truly made by people who didn't care. And after I heard his argument, and saw the damning examples he gave, I saw the exact same parallels running through so many other aspects that I hated out of this game. But I won't steal the words from his mouth. He came across this truly depressing realization, and to his video you will go to hear it. We don't rehash one point. Please go and watch his video too, it will be linked in the description. They've announced their weekly patches, which have fixed a few things at best, but like I've said, they can't fix the core of what's wrong with this game. And given how little time and what constrained conditions they released it in, how can they afford to patch this to any playable level, when they obviously need all the time they can get for their next release? My guess is that they will do the same they did with Empire, patch what they can in some small period of time, then cut their losses and bail. I'm guessing they'd have to.
otherwise risk their next game being even worse on release, barring Sega having a flash of actual reason. But honestly, what can they make next? Remaking any previous games with the engine they have will generally be worse, and they've shown they no longer have the ability to manage a game of this scale anymore. The only recent thing they've done well was Shogun, which was tiny. Their engine is crippling them, and their publisher is killing them. All the bullshit DLC decisions, all the horrific launches, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here and wager that all the fucking streamlining is coming directly from those cunts. This is not the death of Creative Assembly or Total War. Identical to there being no pivotal fall of the Roman Empire, which simply faded, or perhaps a better adjective would be rotted, away to nothing, this downward trend can be stopped, but whether or not it will, that's up to Sega and Creative Assembly. There will be more games, but if this sort of pervading shittiness continues, Total War will die. I end this review simply sad, because I see this series fading away, and all me and other fans are left with is broken promises and a sad shell of a game that only highlights its own failings. The serious problems of Rome 2, not the bugs, optimization, or glitches, but the core mechanics are not things that can be fixed. They can't fix battles that are crippled by their engine, and they can't fix a campaign that's built around absurd limitations, not to a degree where it can be said it succeeded as a sequel. A proper sequel is one that makes the original unplayable. Mass Effect 2 was an improvement over 1 in every single way, to the point where the first became painful to play just because of how great the sequel was. Rome 2 is not better than Rome 1, and I'm not talking through rose-tinted vision of one of the extensive mods. Vanilla Build 1.0 Rome 1 is better.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them! I hate you! I loved you!
It's true that when it's looked at isolated, Rome 2 is a good game, the same way that Empire was a good game. And when looked at by itself, it is an amazing experience, and a truly unique one among gaming. The heart of what makes Total War is still here. The size and horror of ancient warfare, it never left. Rome 2 is fun to play, but every time that I sit down to play it, every battle, through every turn, I see how Rome 1 was better. Not unanimously, but ultimately. They are all a part of Total War. Whilst Empire has its unique setting to make me still want to play it every now and then, Rome 2 has nothing to keep me playing it. This game is worse than Rome 1. This game no longer interests me. This game is worse than Empire.
You see, he lives in you.
forgotten me?
No. How could I?
You have forgotten who you are, and so forgotten me. Look inside yourself. You are more than what you have become. You must take your place in the circle of life.
How can I go back? I'm not who I used to be.
Remember.